Welcome back for a new video. So first of all, a thank you to everyone that is keeping on supporting this channel that is slowly growing every day, and I'm really happy about the results. So as always, you are gonna find all the code, the source code at the end of the video, available to everyone that is signed up for a Patreon account, and you can find the link in the description below. So today I'm gonna see, we saw in the last video, we set up this simple C# tutorial framework in which we have these different application APIs, and we have this data layer and the entities model. Today I want to show you how to use the entity framework to load data from your application. So we're going to see a couple of things. The first one is going to be, we're going to set up a simple hospital entity in which we have patients, we have medications, we have diagnoses, and we have visits. Alright, so we're gonna create inside the entity folder, which is our model folder, 3 new files. We're gonna create visits, then we're going to create patients, and then we're going to create medications, and finally we're going to create diagnoses. So these are our base classes. Our person class, it's not necessary anymore, so I'm just going to delete it for now. And we're gonna start from the basic item that we're going to use, okay, which is in this case, it's the patient. Alright, so we need a patient ID, which is the primary key of the patient's table. So we're gonna use you're gonna use a GUID, and this one is gonna be patient ID. Actually, this one should be called patient, because the database table is going to be called patients. Same goes for visit and medications. So patient ID, then we're going to need a name, or actually we're going to call it given name. Then we might need something like, not sure at this stage, but let's leave it for now. Let's make our model simple, because I just want to focus on the relationship side of things. So let's have a look at the diagnosis. So this one, the diagnoses are required to have, of course, a diagnosis, which is going to be, for now, just a string. Then we need a patient ID and a diagnosis. Now, for the diagnosis, we need to link the patient back. Alright, now, what kind of relationship there is between a patient and a diagnosis? There is one patient can have many diagnoses. So the kind of relationship we want to have in here is that the diagnosis as a patient, alright, but then on the other side, on the patient, a patient can have a collection. So we're gonna use an I collection, which should autocomplete. Okay. So we have the relationship between diagnosis and patient. All right. So now let's move on to medication. Medication is going to have, as before, it's going to have a medication ID, which is a GUID, and then we're going to have a string for the name of the medication, and we're gonna need with the patient, we're gonna have a similar relationship. So a medication is gonna have one medication, can only have one patient. Okay, I don't think a medication can be shared across patients. So we're gonna have an I collection. Actually, this one is the opposite way. So this one is actually gonna be is gonna have a patient. So we have a patient in here, all right, and therefore the patient is going to also need an I collection of medication. I collection. So the medication as a name and as a patient. The last one, we're going to have the visits. Okay, let's leave it visit for now. Let's work out these 3 classes. So let's add a new folder here, and then we're going to call it T02. Patient model, and what we're gonna do in this model here, we're gonna The reason why I'm adding something in the test folder is because I like to see things to be tested before I'm actually going to do an implementation of my model. Alright, so in here I'm gonna create a new C# class and I'm gonna test it. So let's call this test patient model test. Okay, so the way in which we do the setup is exactly the same as we did here for the person. Okay, but with a difference. Here I use the data context that I defined in here in the actual data layer. But because here I'm testing and I'm gonna show you how I like to do my testing, I'm going to show you how you can actually define a testing layer directly in your entity inside your tests file, so that things are gonna be you can actually do small tests for your application, check if what you want is actually what is required for your application to do, and then decide if that's the correct approach for you. So I need to create a new class, patient data context test, and in here what I'm actually going to do, I'm actually going to create a data context, so it's gonna extend DB context the same way. So it's going to extend from entity framework code. Then I'm going to put the cursor here, command dot, and then I'm going to generate the constructor for it, and it's going to automatically add the DB context options. Now I need to select the DB set. So I'm going to have DB set patient coming from entity, and this one's going to be called patients. Then we're going to have another DB set for medication called medication. And the last DB set is going to be for diagnosis, and the table name is going to be diagnosis. Okay, so now I've created this data context. I can actually consume this data context inside this patient model test. In which way? So exactly like I did before, I can actually create, I'm gonna just copy paste this block because it's gonna be quite similar and I actually don't remember everything. So here we're gonna import the patient data context test. Here we're gonna use the SQLite in memory. So we're gonna use test support TF helpers. And now here, instead of using data context, I'm gonna use patient data context test. And here we have a new patient. Let's remove some of the unnecessary usings. Oh, okay, yes. The reason why it's complaining it's because I also need to put a public void, maybe async test patient model. So let's move all of this inside here. So we created the actually this one would be the given name. So we have given name, family name, and now we have context.patients.add the new person, patients.patient ID. Everything exactly like before. This one is coming from xUnit, and finally we need to say that this one is a fact coming from xUnit, so we can actually run the test. And we need the entity framework call to retrieve the patient, and this one is going to be the given name. Let's just make a quick test to ensure that this one is actually working the way we expect. So it's going to create an SQLite in memory database. So it says I cannot find person. Oh, right, because of course I deleted this entity from here. So this data context is not valid anymore. Alright, so let's close and let's try again. Probably wasn't such a good idea to remove the person without doing everything. So let's run this test again. I restored the patient. Yeah, and of course data context needs to be restored. And there you go. We have created our patient. Alright, now the next bit. What is going to be about? The next bit is going to be about, now we added a patient and now we need to, let's say, given our model, we have a patient, we have medications, and we have So medication, diagnose. So this one is actually diagnose, diagnosis. Okay, now we fix that. Now we have a public async void. We call it assign medication to patient. This is going to be a fact coming from, and we're gonna do the same once more. So we're gonna create our patient. Between tests, by the way, what is actually going to happen is that the database gets reset. So when the context reaches this point at the end of the line, it actually gets deleted. So at each test, you have an essentially fresh, in this scenario, you have a fresh new database. You could actually use a connection string for your database so that the content of your database actually get updated each time. But in that case, the tests wouldn't be atomic. They would actually depend on each other, which isn't the best solution. So you go one by one. So in this case, we're gonna see how to add one medication to one patient. So we create one patient, okay, and we add the patient to the database. Then the next bit is to create a medication. And later I'm gonna show you how actually you can create those entities, of which you don't really care about the details about, in an easier way using some framework. Alright. So let's create then a medication. So a medication is a new medication, and we're gonna have a medication ID, which is a GUID.new GUID, and then we have a name, which is let's call it paracetamol. For our patient, it's gonna get just some paracetamol. So we created a new function in which we're going to create a patient. We create a medication and we assign the medication to the patient. And then we check that the number of medications given to this patient is just one at the moment. But what happens if we actually try to run the test? So let's make this one a bit bigger. We're going to encounter this error. Object reference is not set to instance of an object. This is something that always happens when someone is new to learn .NET or C#, and happens because something it's set to null. Why something is set to null? It's set to null because, for example, was not loaded from the database or was not included into the model. In this case, the line throwing the error is line 54, this one here, new person, medications, add medication. So let's try to put a breakpoint in here. Let's have a look at what happens. We have two buttons here. We can click on the debug test. So the debug test, what it's going to do is going to allow us to step into the code while the test runs. Is one of the best features you can possibly find in .NET. So we are here, we are new person, medications, add medication. Let's have a look at what new person medication look like. So we have on the side, we have the variables that are available to inspect. So we can actually expand this. Let's make a little bit more room. You can see the medications here is set to null. So medications is a collection and is null, meaning that this new person has no medications. It's null, the value of this collection. So it means I cannot add to an empty to a non-existing collection. I cannot add new elements. I should create a new list and then add to the list, and then I can actually save the changes. Okay. So this is the first mistake we are doing here. So, but even then, let's have a look. Let's remove this line. Let's just comment out this line. Just because we want to exclude, because actually in this code there is a second error. Okay. So of course this is not going to work correctly because it's not going to save anything. Correct. Now that I removed this add medication. How can I fix this problem? I can fix this problem by introducing a new variable. And this new variable is medications, and it's gonna be a new list. And now what we can do medications dot add medication. Then we can do new person dot medications is equal to medications. And now this line should actually work fine. Okay, now the compiler is just warning me about the fact that this can be simplified, that the new medication is a list with medication. Okay, but I prefer this style. I prefer to be explicit about what to do. I'm gonna add to my collection, I'm gonna add the medication. Just my personal preference. So let's have a look what happens now. We can just run the test normally. Okay, the test fails again. As you can see, it says that the database operation was expected to affect 1 row, but actually affected 0 rows. Alright, so why do you think this is happening here? So let's have a close look to this code. So we are adding a medication, okay, and then we save the changes async. We add the medication to the new person, saying that this is the medication ID. However, Entity Framework, what it's actually trying to do, is trying to use a medication ID. Because we provide this medication ID, we are kind of doing it manually. So we actually should remove this line, should just provide this one to be added automatically. So if now we run the test, skip a little bit ahead. As you can see now, we actually adding the medication correctly because we're not initializing this object with an ID. So Entity Framework is actually able to retrieve those values. We can also check that the medication inserted has the name of paracetamol. So assert.equal, and we're gonna say paracetamol. So we take the name, it should be equal to paracetamol. So let's run this test. And as you can see, paracetamol is the element actually added to this patient. Now we saw how to add with this way, and we fixed the bug in which we removed the GUID from our initial medication. However, let's say we want to actually have a medication in which we are going to define our medication ID. So we're going to do it's going to be GUID.new GUID. We have a name, and now we want to assign it to our person. So we're gonna have our patient is equal to our new person, and now we need to inform our context to add this new medication. So we're gonna have context dot medications dot add, and we add our medication. So we removed a whole bunch of code from here. Okay, so let's have a look at what is happening here. We create a medication, we provide a medication ID, we provide with which one is the patient we want to create. Then we add the medication, we add the new medication. We're gonna get the changes. And let's have a look if this one works. Everything should be exactly as before. As you can see, the test has passed. Everything is exactly as before. We can find our patient, we find the medications assigned to this patient, and the name of the medication is paracetamol. We can also do this, we can also create a second medication. Okay, so to do this test, now we need to make some changes. So first of all, the number of medication should be equal to 2, it's not anymore a single, so this one needs to be changed to assert.equal, and now we expect 2, and medications, p.medications dot count should be 2. Now this expression here is not anymore the correct expression. What we need to do, we need to assert the collection. So we're gonna do assert dot collection, and the collection element is going to be p dot medications, and then we're gonna have the item, and we want to know that the item is going to be an assert dot contains, and contains aspirin in the item.name. This is the first assertion we want to do. And here we can actually add a second assertion, and the second assertion is going to be item, and then we do again assert.contains paracetamol in item.name. So we can actually now remove this line in here. We can make the formatting a little bit better so that these two are in line. So let's run this test. We are checking that paracetamol and aspirin are in our collection. Run test, and passed. So this is everything for today. So doing a brief recap, we have essentially seen how we can add a patient and a medication. Didn't really make use of diagnosis yet. Going to next. We saw how we can create a DB context just for testing. So this one could actually have been inside the data layer, but you can also create a particular context just inside our unit test folder. This thing is useful because actually allows you to assert assertions, to test your models, even just to play with Entity Framework if you never did it before. I think this is a great way to do it, and I believe if I knew it when I started learning it, I would be in a much better place today. So, that's everything for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a thumb up, and see you next time. Bye bye.